He stole our thunder. Now you know who's going to join us on stage. Are we good to go, gang? Okay. All right, so we're going to start off with the producer of Saw, Mr. Oren Koules. We have the star of Saw, Cary Elwes. We have a man, his character goes by the name of John Kramer, but we know him as Mr. Tobin Bell. Co-writer of Saw, and he plays young Adam, Mr. Leigh Whannell. The other producer of Saw, Mr. Burg. And of course, we have Billy joining us up front.
Oh shit.
Oh my God.
How are we doing, Billy? Are you okay down the end?
Looks like he's rapping.
My name is Jigsaw, and I'm sorry. There we go. So, Leigh, I want to start with you, because you and James, you started this thing. Can you take us all the way back to the very beginning of this? Where were you in your life? What you were doing? You wrote this screenplay. Well, you made the short, and then you wrote the screenplay. Take us back to the genesis of this project.
Hi everyone. James and I met at film school in Melbourne at RMIT. I was waiting for one person to go, there's going to be an RMIT graduate in here. And we kind of bonded over our love of horror movies, Evil Dead and stuff like that, which was frowned upon. The film school I went to was not trying to churn out little Spielbergs. It was very like, you had to be making a film about, you know, a rock, and that rock represented your childhood trauma. And you would shoot the rock on Super 8 and project the film onto milk or something. It was very artistic. And so James and I were the secret horror movie lovers. And so when film school finished, we kicking around in various crappy jobs in Melbourne, and we finally realized no one's going to give us a big check to make a movie. We're going to have to pay for it ourselves. And the Blair Witch Project had just come out. We were really inspired by that. And there was kind of a wave of movies that made us realize we could pay for our own film, pay for it ourselves, and go that way. And that's when we decided to come up with a concept all set in one room. And it took us a long time, but we finally came up with the idea for Saw. We wrote the script, and my agent at the time said, "Don't do this in Australia, bring it to the US where they make these kinds of movies." And right before we left for the US is when we made the short. So the short came second. It was kind of a proof of concept, demo reel, So we would say, here's the script, and here's 8 minutes of it if you think that we're, you know, not capable of making it. And so, yeah, it was kind of a little package that we sent around.
And then Oren, but what did you see in Leigh and James' script that said, yeah, I want to do this?
Well, the truth be told, the short was insane. I don't know how many of you have ever seen the short. But here's the real truth. I read the script, and about page 90, it says the guy stands up. And I'm like, what guy? Because it was one line of stage direction on like page whatever. So I'm going back as fast as I can, and I'm calling Greg Hoffman, and he's like, wait, I'm putting kids to bed, I haven't read it yet. So I'm going back, and I finally found this about the guy laying there, because it's not, when you're watching a movie, you see him there, but when there's one line description, a guy laying in the room, you don't really pay attention to it 90 pages later. So anyway, I was blown away, and we chatted, and these guys, I think, were already in the air. And we met with them. And I think they thought, I've seen Leigh, I've seen you talk about this. You thought, you always make fun of me. So this hockey guy said to me, so do you want to be Adam? And you said, I guess. And I said to James, do you want to direct? And he said, I guess. I said, well, let's go make a movie. And you said, you and James, what do you guys do?
Australians aren't used to that kind of direct. What we're used to is people finding excuses to say no. Like, you know, I'd love to do it. I'm getting divorced, so I'm a little short on cash. Like, we're not used to somebody saying, let's go do it.
So you guys got the parking lot or something like that?
Yeah, we were like, this is a joke, right? He's not going to make it. But very true to your word, you guys.
Yeah.
Out of everyone we met with, these guys were the first meeting we took. So we flew over to Los Angeles. Our manager booked us into some hotel, and we did like a week of meetings. And these guys were the first meeting we took on the first day.
Wow.
And then we were like, yeah, okay, fine, we met with those guys, but let's get on the Universal lot. You know, and we thought it was exciting because they'd be like, you guys want anything to drink? Diet Coke, water? We'd be like, free Diet Coke. And then at the end of the week, we were like, wait, those two guys were the only ones who said, we guarantee that you'll direct it, you'll act in it, and we'll be shooting in 6 months. And we're the only ones that will guarantee that. And at the end of the week, we realized they were the only ones that had said that. Everyone else would say things like, well, let's develop it for a while, see what happens. It's the Hollywood game that you play.
And was there any debate between you and James, or between Oren and Mark, as to whether James should direct or Leigh? Because you're a phenomenal director. Let's just put it
Thanks, Christian. Let's not pretend we're not friends. Let's not pretend that you just said that.
As I can say, Leigh wrote the script to Saw. So without Leigh Whannell, there is no James Wan.
Right. Wait, he's not here, so we can say all this. If he was here, you'd be like, you know,
I'd say the
James.
same thing. I'd be like, if there wasn't an amazing script.
Back then, you were like, do you really need the dead weight, James? This guy's holding you back. You could be Scorsese.
No, they showed up, as Oren said, it was all a fluke. Somebody was in their agent's office, saw the short, brought it to us. Next thing I know, we're watching the short, we're going home that night to read the script. They were at the Hyatt on Sunset, which I don't even think exists anymore.
The Grafton?
Next door.
Is the Grafton? Does that still exist?
And there were no Uber because I think he took a taxi and somebody drove him back to the hotel back then. And Oren looked at me and was like, let's make it. I was like, all right, okay, let's go. So that's how it all came about. And
It wasn't 6 months. I don't want to interrupt.
It was 6 weeks.
It was like 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Right.
So James Wan is Malaysian birth, Aussie citizenship. So we had to fly them out of the country to get them back to get work permits. Leigh came in right away. James got stuck in Ottawa. They told us to use Ottawa, Canada. It's the easy way to get back in. He was there for like 2 or 3 weeks. We prepped the whole movie, but this is 2003. You couldn't just send like a great video of this room and say this is going to be.
There was no FaceTime.
You couldn't do any of that. So basically, we were trying to get him a picture just to say, oh, by the way, this is who we're casting. So James came in with like 8 days left before we started shooting. It's like, wow, it looks great, let's go.
Every movie should be like that. And casting, so Oren, talking about casting, Cary. So you had already been acting for 20 years by the point that Saw was made and you starred in it. What was it? And I think it's fair to say that it was a departure for you, going into a kind of hardcore horror space.
Yes.
So what was it that drew you to Saw?
It was the fact that it was so original. My manager, Ben Levine, who's here tonight, was actually at Evolution with Oren and Mark, and he presented me with the script, with the short, and said, read this, I think you'll be blown away, it's really original. And I read it in one sitting, and knew right away that it was definitely something I wanted to do. I liked the character, I loved the idea of Dr. Gordon being this complex guy who had all kinds of secrets and stuff he was trying to keep from people, and the whole idea of Tobin's character, John Kramer, was just brilliant. I just thought it was so innovative and new. And I read it, I loved it, and Ben called me and said they want to meet with you. So we met at the farmer's market. And I know, that's why they wanted to meet us. Yeah.
That's where we do all our big budget
Right there.
movie meetings.
And it was amongst all the vendors and stuff, and I sat down and they came, Leigh and James, and James had, I'll never forget, had this big art folder under his arm, and they were very sweet. I was actually taken with their charm right away. As you can tell, they're very charming people, and very funny. And James said, would you like to see some of the artwork? I said, yeah, sure. So he unzipped this big folder, and I proceeded to see all the work these guys had done. They had a full rendering of the pig outfit with the mask. They had Billy, of course. They had a beautiful rendering. Wait, I'll get to that. And they had the bathroom, all with it was all rusty and everything, and the pipes and everything. And then they had this blueprint of this reverse bear trap, which I recognized from the short, which Leigh was in wearing the bear trap. And I looked at it, and I'll never forget, I said to James, I don't know if you remember this, I said, wow, that looks really intricate. And James went, oh yeah, it's operational. That was the moment where I went, okay, these guys are really serious.
Tobin. You have become the de facto face, the moral compass, the weaver of nightmares of Saw across the last 20 years. When you became involved with this film, did you have any inkling of what was going to happen? And how did you approach your character? Because I read, there was a great LA Times article this week, and the writer Koules referenced that you have composition books for every one of the movies because John Kramer changes. He's in a different space with each film. Can you talk about what this film triggered in you, and then your process as an actor and how you've applied yourself in really owning this space of John Kramer?
Well, I was forced to take my time, that's for sure, because, you know, from the beginning, I wouldn't say he was an afterthought, but lying on the floor in a pool of blood a number of days. In the first shoot, clearly the story, even though John is in the middle, I was fascinated by these three guys locked in one room. It was very waiting for Godot for me, and when I read the script, it was unusual, and so I knew. And I learned doing a small role in Mississippi Burning that there's a lot of strength in silence. So the story was really about Cary and Leigh and their evolution, but they're in the middle of this seesaw, not to make a pun, but is this guy who you find out a lot about at the end of the film, which I won't go into because some of you may not have seen it. But
Is there anyone here who hasn't seen it?
There's a couple.
is anybody who's going to see it who hasn't seen it?
Yeah, we have a 9-year-old over here, Kat, who we just met.
He can't give away the ending.
Yeah, so he hasn't seen this one, but he saw the last one. So
That's why you do the Q&A at the end, Christian.
Well, one of my greatest concerns, which James helped me, well, I'm going to have to get into the ending by talking about that. So,
fingers in your ears, Cash.
Well, I will just add further to what Tobin's saying is, even though in that first movie there's a small presence for Tobin's character, I feel like his character hung over the whole movie for me. Everything was really about him, and he was really guiding the movie in pushing it around, even though, as Tobin said, the power of silence, even when he wasn't present, I felt the presence of his character.
Mm-hmm.
So when we got Tobin, you know, James and I would be fans of what he done.
mm-hmm.
There was this presence, even in scenes that Tobin wasn't in, we felt like he was there.
So Tobin, you referenced these guys being chained or cuffed up and covered in blood. Can you, Cary and Leigh, can you talk about the shoot itself and what it was like? Because it was a tight shoot, right? It was 18 days. But
Yeah.
how long were you cuffed up? What were those days like? It must have been.
It was the first week, it was a 3-week shoot, so 6 days of us in that room.
More
It was
than
fun
that.
times. It was more than that, was it?
Yeah.
There's no one I'd rather be chained up with.
It felt like a year.
I mean, it felt like a year.
I was chained to a pole,
Yeah,
a rusty pole. I noticed there was only one guy on the crew who had the keys to the padlock to my feet. I watched that guy like a whole day. Every time he sat down and put something on a table, I was, is it the key? Because obviously restroom breaks were interesting, to say the least.
We did it chronologically, which was good.
Yeah.
You're starting with the first scene on the first day.
Yeah.
And, but I remember James being quite frantic because I think he had all these grand plans. He hadn't made a feature film yet, and this was his baptism of fire. You know, he had these beautiful tracking shots, and that all went out the window. These guys were like, buddy, you got 18 days. Throw the camera on the guy's shoulder, shoot the rehearsal, and let's go. James was like, you know, but what about the bush-in on it? He's like, forget the bush-ins. And James was quite upset because it was so run and gun, wasn't it? It was like, it's that scene from Ed Wood where he does like one take and he's like, cut, Brendan, it's beautiful, moving on. And even the crew is like, what? Like it was, these guys were always there saying, beautiful, Brendan, moving on, next setup.
No, literally, we never sat down, really, other than when, as our characters lying on the floor. There were no chairs on the set. And of course, James wanted to be able to shoot a 180 shot all the way around the room, so they actually had to seal the room at one point. So all the crew, all 5 of them at that point, were standing around the camera, and as the camera panned around the room, they were all around it so that they wouldn't get caught in the shot. It was really amazing, actually. I had about 12 pages of dialogue a day. Just if you look carefully in my pants, I have all the scenes in my pocket. So it's just literally, we shoot one scene, bam, next.
You see that? I remember they're having this method thing of like, I'm not talking to Cary the whole. For the first 2 days, I would have my Discman in. That's a device for listening to music, children. I was like listening to Fugazi in the corner. And by that day too, Cary and I are doing like Marlon Brando impressions. It's true. It's crazy. Yeah, and eventually I just took my headphones out and we're like, so
We had
what do you
so
do on
little
the
money.
weekend?
We had so little money, we couldn't afford another costume, remember? So my costume that I wear, that suit, pants, and that blue shirt, by day 14, it really began to get angry smelling. I said to Leigh, I go, listen, I know we're low budget. Is there any way we can fork out for another shirt and pants? Because the crew would like treat me like, hey, Cary, how are you? Great to see you. Just stay right over there. And James thought, I think we could probably come up with that. So finally, in the last week of shooting, the last 4 days of shooting, I actually had a new costume. And they gave me a new shirt. So
I love that certain crew members have become like cult. I've seen like photos of Speedy the sound guy online. Speedy has a following. He was a great guy.
That's
Yeah,
the boom.
Speedy the boom guy.
There is a very descriptive word that's.
Well, he would always stand with the pole. He would have it across his shoulders, just chilling. Yep.
that's great.
There were some concepts that were introduced in the first film by Leigh and James that we have tried to keep as we moved along, like the treatment of the terminally ill by the medical community. That has been something that we've touched on a number of times, including in Saw 10. And Saw 6 as well. It comes up frequently. When people talk to me about the Saw films, they frequently talk about the concepts of the films. Cherish your life. Those who don't appreciate life don't deserve life. And when people talk to me about the films, they frequently don't talk about the traps and the special effects and the things that we go to horror movies to hold on to our seats about. They talk about some of the things that get voiced, some of the ideas that get voiced that make them think. And sometimes people are dealing with all kinds of personal things, and to hear something like cherish your life when it's surrounded by the kind of intensity of a Saw film can make that phrase stand out in your head. And when you go out of the theater, some people are so ungrateful to be alive. Think about that, and we all have to think about that in this world that we're living in today. So I appreciate that aspect of John Kramer's development over the years, that we've been able to layer the films and not just depend on the amazing special effects and the twists and the scares.
The morality of the franchise is something it's foundational, and it's incredibly interesting because it's very different if you think about the big genre franchises and horror franchises that have existed over the years. This is the one that, as I said earlier, like it has a moral compass to it, even though it's distorted. For Mark and Oren, is that one of the things? I mean, you've been able to not just like keep this franchise on the tracks, but grow. I mean, the performance of the film that came out last year was phenomenal. So how do you?
Well, I'll tell you, the shock, Mark might have a different answer, but the shock for me was we were at Comic-Con, saw 2 or 3 were at a dais, and Tobin, they kept talking about the protagonist. The protagonist, Jigsaw the protagonist, the hero. It kind of sunk in. We're in a room with like 2,200 people, and they all were cheering that Jigsaw was the hero of the movie. Moral compass. I remember looking at Tobin and going, "What did it mean?" That was, as far as morality, that was kind of a wake-up call.
And back to this film, you talk about a wake-up call. At what point did you know, oh, this is going to be a hit? And then,
Sundance? It's gonna be what? It's gonna be a hit.
Saw 1, yeah, we
Sundance?
screened it at Sundance.
3 midnights.
In 2004, and the audience went crazy. And then Oren called me up and said he got a call from somebody at Sundance saying they want to have a second screening for their employees and all the volunteers, because the first volunteer screening of 1,300 seats at Koules Theater sold out. And that's never happened before. And the guy was like, we really need another one, so many people want to see it. So we did a second screening, and then I think at that point we kind of knew maybe there's something here. And then we did a research screening in Chatsworth, and the numbers went through the roof high that Lionsgate made us do, because at that point it was a direct-to-video movie. And Lionsgate did not believe the movie could have tested that high. They were convinced that Oren and myself invited all our friends to the research. So, like 3 weeks later, they did a second screening, and they didn't tell us where it was.
That's Las Vegas.
They told us Las
We were in Las
Vegas.
Vegas with Greg Hopkins sitting in a lounge at 6 o'clock, and they literally were cloak and dagger. They were convinced we rigged it. So at 6 o'clock, they told us we went to the Union Station Theater in the Union Station Casino, which was no great shakes, trust me. And we tested higher. And at that point, Tim Palin, who should get a ton of credit for this, Tim Palin was the head of marketing.
At Lionsgate at the time.
And anyway, and he was on the phone after we were counting cards. And he was on the phone after and said, we have to release this movie because our scores were higher than the ones we thought we rigged. So that's how we
So because of that, the movie came out theatrically, and it went to Toronto and then opened Halloween weekend, and you guys have all made it possible.
and based on, by the end of opening weekend, you'd already greenlit a sequel, right? Is that?
They greenlit the sequel about a month or two before we opened.
Wow, amazing. We
But
got to wrap.
since then, only because Oren and myself have always been careful, we never greenlit another movie until after the previous movie opens. So it took it. We just wanted to be 100% sure, and we're kind of superstitious.
Before we watch this, I just want each of you just share like the one thing that you love most about this movie that we're going to watch tonight. Starting with you, Mark, and then we'll work on with you.
Yeah, I'm gonna say about this movie and every Saw movie. Thank God we cast Tobin Bell.
What was the question? What do you think about the movie?
Yeah, what do you love most
Oh,
about
what do you
this?
well, you know, this movie gave me my life. Like, so I have so much affection for it. You know, it's everything. Without this movie, I wouldn't be sitting here. I wouldn't be directing movies. God knows what I'd be doing. So I'm just so thankful to this movie and to the fandom. And when I think about Saw, a lot of people think of the franchise, but I do think of this first movie because it was such a pivotal point in my life. You know, it's tough for me, you know, I'm in it, so I can't watch it. I saw someone online said that Saw is Titanic for weirdos. And so I'm like, cool. And I love this little cult that it spawned. And James and I are kind of loving the fact that we sort of inadvertently created a millennial Freddy Krueger. But yeah, that's what I think about, is just how it kind of kick-started my life. And yeah, I'm still thankful, very thankful to it. And to everyone on this stage.
What I like about this film, there's a moment at the end of the film that when I read the script, I didn't anticipate that moment. And I thought if they shoot this well, it could be one of those moments in film that is unforgettable. And it has proved to be the case, and without Leigh's reaction to that moment, it wouldn't be what it is. And the other thing is, I want to thank Cary, because he was the only person who would have lunch with me. Because I was such a bloody mess from my head and all of that. And so Cary invited me into his room, and we had lunch and talked about the Beatles the whole time.
There's a great photo of you and myself and Cary and Michael Emerson, all covered from head to toe in blood. Just like at the Lacey Street Studios for you Saw enthusiasts. Yeah, morning, it's still there. You can go there.
Cary, I can only speak to the fact that I wouldn't have the fan base that I have now without this movie. I mean, there are very few Princess Bride Saw crossover fans. I guess I'm mistaken.
Hey, Cary, should we play Princess Bride instead?
Let's talk about that instead.
That's hilarious. I had a great time making this, even though it was a challenge. I think I love challenges anyway. Whenever someone presents me with a challenge, that's when I get excited. And the idea of shooting something in 18 days first seemed pretty insane, but we really got into it. We as we mentioned earlier, there wasn't a lot of time for chit-chat and hanging around. We were working all the time. And poor Tobin, you know, people think, oh, Tobin had it so easy, he's lying on the floor, or how hard can that be? It actually is really painful. You try lying on the floor for 12 hours a day, getting up maybe for half hour for bathroom breaks or whatever, and to eat.
It's the getting up that's hard.
It actually hurts. And this guy was a trooper. He was amazing. So give it up for Tobin.
I want to add a quick thing about that, because we didn't have a lot of money, but we actually offered to build a double for Tobin, and he wouldn't do it. He said, I want to be there, I want to see what this guy feels. So Tobin Bell, we offered to build him, I know it's hard to believe with all of the stories of no money, but we offered to build him a full life, and he said no, because so many shots are over him. But he said no, he wouldn't do it. He wanted to be on the floor the whole time.
That's amazing.
And Princess Bride are my kids' favorite movie, and it drives me insane. I'm not kidding.
Oren, really quickly, what's the thing you love most about this film?
It's just, it's hard to explain. It's just, you know, a little bit what Leigh said, it's kind of life-changing. And to do something, we were done shooting at this point 21 years ago. So to think, you know, there's kids, there's so many million things that have happened in those 21 years. But a day like today's a pretty good day.
It's awesome. And it didn't just change your lives, it changed this film, and the films that were born from it have changed so many people's lives. It's going to change Cash's life.
Christian, that's a good segue. Before we wrap up, because I just want to say that everyone here on this stage knows, I'm not just saying this, like the stars and the heart of the Saw films is the fans, the Saw fans. Like, you guys keep it alive, keep it afloat, and we're so thankful to you guys for your love for this movie and for the franchise and for the character and everything. And like, we rarely get to interact with. I feel like musicians get to meet their fans in person all the time. Filmmakers never do. So on nights like these, it's a good chance to say in person, thank you.
Thank you, guys.